Hi all you wonderful people and welcome to Simply Scuba and welcome to Ask Mark. Something just fell over there, but that doesn't mind. This is where I answer your questions, queries and address any corrections that you might have. So if you've got any questions about scuba diving or snorkeling or whatever it is, let me know down in the comments below, and if you use the hashtag AskMark, it just means that I can find it and then I'll probably mention it on next week's show. If I don't get to your questions, dreadfully sorry. I'll hopefully get to them eventually. I get a lot of questions each week and to be honest, I cherry pick the most interesting ones, but I will eventually get to yours, hopefully. In this week's show, I'm talking about altering your algorithm. That's quite interesting on your dive computer. Let's see what that one is. Weight pouches, twin set diving, Drygloves, SPGs, submersible pressure gauges, and Boltsnaps. So let's dive straight into the first question, which this week is from 391 Wombat. Okay, do you recommend diving an air profile on your computer whilst diving nitrox as an extra margin of safety? Are there reasons not to other than MOD considerations? Yeah, this is one thing that I have experienced other divers doing on sort of dive boats where, say they have like a 32% mix and that's their breathing mix, and they go on the dive but they have their dive computer set to just air or something just so that it's like extra conservative. I've never really understood it though. I've heard of other divers and they change their algorithm to like a 99.99 so that they know the like maximum limit, as it were, but really, your dive computer has all these algorithms and modes inside of it for a reason, and as long as you don't go right up to the limit, you're not sort of looking at your NDL and it's counting down to 1 and you're counting down 60 seconds so that you can stay here for an extra, okay, now I'm going to start to ascend, or as soon as your stop has ended, boom, you then go up to the next one. As long as you're not doing that, you should be fine. You always have to have in the back of your mind all sorts of things like if you're tired and dehydrated, if the water's cold, all of those kind of things, then just be extra conservative. Just spend a little bit more time, just breathe some more gas at that depth, I mean, as long as you have that gas, and then exit when it's sort of the most safe. You've done as much decompression as you can and then exit. But I don't fiddle around with my dive computer and set it to a different mode, because then later on, if someone has to like analyze your dive computer, then as far as they know, you were diving on air for this dive, and if there was an incident, then that all goes into the records and it just makes things really confusing. So no, I just tend to have my dive computer set to what I'm diving on. You analyze your mix, you put that into your dive computer and you dive that. I'm not into this all sort of one computer is set up to one thing and one's onto another, because it just kind of adds up just more confusion in the water. Whereas if you just have, this is it, this is your decompression algorithm, this is what you're diving on, it's clean and simple, and yeah, you don't get any mixed signals underwater. DVN Ultimate asks, what type of weight pockets do you use with your travel setup? Do you have any experience with the Maris XR side weight pockets? I don't know what to think about the Velcro closing mechanism, looks odd. Does Maris produce trim options that you connect to the back plate? I could not find any. Both OMS and Scuba Pro have these options. Have you tried any of these? Thanks. So what weight options do I use on my travel setup? I just use a weight belt. Nothing fancy, just a 2-inch webbing strap with a quick release buckle. That's it. But when I'm traveling, I tend to, it tends to be quite warmer waters, so I don't need that much lead, so it doesn't dig into my hips quite so much. As far as the Maris XR, the quick release, yeah, they're similar to the X Deep ones that have like this long Velcro strip that you just sort of undo. It's a little bit different. The mechanism itself is pretty fine. One thing that I can't comment on is like long-term use. Velcro in like years time, especially when you're getting it wet and whatnot, it does get a little bit feeble. So can't comment on that, but that would be in the back of my mind. Scuba Pro ones, I do quite like Scuba Pro ones. They have pinch clips. I think X Deep have a pinch clip version as well. But as far as trim weight pockets that attach to the back plate, I don't know of that many that physically attach to the back plate. Most of them tend to attach to the cam bands around the sides. You can always just thread lead weight onto cam bands if you're diving on singles, because the cutout slots in weight blocks, they're 2 inches, so you can thread them onto your cam bands. This year, I think it was this year, Mares have released the straws. They released stars and straws, which are both like weight strips. I think the stars one is designed for side mount, goes down your spine, whereas straws is like a long trim weight pouch. You're supposed to get 2. They say you can dive with just 1, but obviously it's going to make you a little bit lopsided. So they say ideally you get 1 for each side, and I think you can fit like 3 or 4 sort of lengthways down the side of your cylinders, so you can have it further up towards your shoulders, so you're a bit more horizontal if you've got floaty shoulders, or vice versa. If you've got floaty feet, you can move the lead a little bit further down your tank. But luckily, touch wood, I don't tend to sort of use trim weight pouches, because I don't need that much lead when I'm diving my travel setup. But yeah, the trim weight pouches, I quite like the X Deep ones, because they're just nice, clean, simple. The Scuba Pro ones were quite nice. I think Mares do a trim weight pouch, which is just like little pinch clips. They're all fairly similar. You get a nylon cord or a pouch with a little flap over the top. Sometimes it has Velcro, sometimes it doesn't, and then you just get a pinch clip. So they're not quick release, and you wouldn't be able to reach it anyway. And that just kind of threads onto your cam bands. I had some old Oceanic ones that do the job. They'll be in a kit bag somewhere in my sort of spares, but yeah, I don't know of anything apart from like a P weight or a V weight. These are more for diving twins. But you can get what's called a P weight, which is similar to this. It kind of sits in the recess down the spine of your back plate, but it's quite rare that a dive center would have one of these. So, and you don't want to travel with something like that. That's the closest thing that I could think of. Otherwise, you could go for a thicker back plate. Mares XR do a 6mm stainless steel, but again, you're traveling, that weighs a few kilos, I think. So that's something else that you've got to think of. But yeah, I just dive a traditional weight belt. The integrated weight pouches, yeah, they're perfectly fine. In my opinion, I quite like ones with the big chunky pinch clips, because they're really secure. They're very simple. Everybody can understand them. As soon as you see it, boom, done, and it's open. Velcro's okay, unless you've got sort of clunky gloves. Then it can be a little bit fiddly in a sort of in a rush. But yeah, it'll do the job. They wouldn't have produced it if it doesn't do the job. But yeah, I always think of the long-term use of Velcro, because eventually it does get a bit weaker, and you don't want your lead just to slip out. But as far as trim weight pouches, yeah, they're all very much the same, and the name on it doesn't matter so much. So yeah, go for the sort of OMS, the Scuba Pro X Deep. There's a whole bunch out there. Joshua Cameron asks, I'm just looking into twin set diving. Cool. In fact, I've been given a paired set of 12 litres with a manifold and twinning bands from a friend, a very generous friend. I need to get wing and a harness and a backplate and a first aid before I can use it in anger. Yeah, you're going to need those. But my question is, when you do 2 dives on a set of twins, do you isolate them and use one tank for the first dive and the second tank for the other dive, or just keep them both open? Monitor how much air you surface with, and plan your second dive profile accordingly. I've got a bit thrown off by your statement of not having to swap tanks, but just turn valves between dives. So yeah, for all like twin set dives, I always have that isolator open, so that you're breathing from both cylinders simultaneously. If you do isolate it, then it means that you're just breathing from one single cylinder, and that buoyancy of that one cylinder is going to become more positive as the dive goes on. So you're going to get a bit lopsided in the water. only a little bit. It's more on sort of side mount where they're a bit further apart, but that's the main sort of issue. So no, leave it open, breathe from both of them, and then you'll get down to like, I don't know, 150 bar, 120 bar, so depending on where it is on the sort of first dive. And then, yeah, your second dive, you dive according to that. Bear in mind that that last like 50 bar is like double, because it's pressure and volume, it's twice as much as what you're used to on a single. So one bar goes twice as far underwater whilst you're diving on a twin set. But as soon as you isolate it, yeah, then you really do isolate it. So if you shut down one valve, then that first stage won't be drawing gas from the other one. And yeah, as long as it's isolated, you'll only be breathing from one side, and you don't really want that. You want it to be as even as possible. And then in the unlikely event that something should go wrong, then you isolate it and you breathe from your one remaining good cylinder. And then you hopefully fix the problem or get out of the water and fix the problem. Nathaniel Shepherd asks, I am wanting to use Drygloves, but I have a neoprene dry suit and it seems that Drygloves are only made for latex or silicone seals. Do you know if it is possible to buy Drygloves on neoprene? I presume fit Drygloves on neoprene. And if it is, will it damage the neoprene? Thank you for your help. Something in the back of my mind says that QB, or at least some QB, could fit onto some neoprene seals as long as it was sort of a certain thickness. But I think I had to do quite a lot of digging at one point, because I must have been asked this question before. I think it kind of can be done, but it's really not what they're made for. And as you said, they're more specifically for latex and silicone. I've seen a couple ways around it. You can get what's called a latex over seal, which is you have your neoprene cuff seal. That's the one that's sealing against your wrist. And then you have a second latex over the top of it, but it's quite a loose sort of over seal. And then the ring system fits onto that. Otherwise, you're using an independent glove system. I've got a pair around, let me dig them out. So these are what I'd call like an independent dry glove. It's basically a dry glove, but with a latex seal attached to the bottom of it. So that's sealing against your wrist, and then your dry suit seal goes over the top of that, and that seals against that. So you have this sort of a dry glove system, but your actual cuff seals are sealing against that latex. All you just need is like a little capillary tube to sort of allow gas to travel into the glove so that you can equalize it. That's probably the quickest and easiest way. They can be a bit of a pain to sort of get on and off, especially by yourself. The first glove, it's pretty easy, but the second glove, it's better if you have a tender, someone to actually help you sort of put the second glove on and make sure that that seal is nice and neat, and then your dry suit seal goes over the top of it nice and neatly. Otherwise, yeah, you probably have to send your dry suit in to get that fitted with like an over seal to physically fit a ring system. Angelo says, it appears that most, if not all, proper brass SPGs are made by Termo Industria in Italy, with brands adding little design cues to distinguish their own, for example, Apex or Hollis. I have seen similar commonalities, ooh, good word use, in masks, fins, and so on. Is this practice common in the dive industry? Cheers. Yeah. I don't think it's a industry secret, but yeah, you will see a lot of similar designs, from masks, fins, SPGs to regulators. And yeah, I don't think there's a huge secret. I mean, the primary example is our the Simply Scuba Mark 1 dive torch. Looks very similar to one of the new Apex lunar mini dive torches, which also looks very similar to the Action what's it called, Active, one of the Ultimate Sports Engineering marine exposure torches, because they're all made by Marine Exposure. Yeah, it's not unusual for brands to not borrow designs, but sort of have them made by different sort of manufacturers. Because when you think of like a mask, you just take a mask, to be able to have that mold and to make it, that's a lot of equipment. The manufacturing process, the molds themselves are really expensive. So to be able to make your money out of them, yeah, it is not unusual for brands to make sort of masks for other brands and just sort of rebadge them. I mean, Sean, myself, and another chap called Nick, we went up to see Apex here in the UK, and all of their sort of making stuff. We did it when they were making the MTXR-C, I believe, and huge machines that are just making one part of a regulator first stage, and then you go through another door and there's another huge machine that's making a different part, and then you got all of these testing things to make sure it's done to the right specifications. So it will be a huge investment for dive manufacturers to each have their own machine that does this sort of one part. And when it gets down to like SPGs, if somebody makes a really great submersible pressure gauge and then you just sort of buy it from them and just fit another sort of face to it, yeah, great. But of course that does come into mind of, well, why would I bother buying this like really expensive one if this is exactly the same? Yeah, that's very much up to you. But yeah, it is not unusual. I don't think it's an industry secret, or if it is, it isn't anymore. But yeah, the longer time you spend in and around like the diving industry and seeing the equipment, you're going to start to see a lot of similarities, especially in like regulators, masks as well. You see the similar like mask designs. Again, that comes down to like the production of the glass, because if you're creating your own diving mask, do you really want to sort of go into making like this unique sort of style of like glass lens, having like however many thousands of them sort of created, because that's ups the price of the mask. Whereas if you get something that is fairly mass produced for other mask designs and then use that part yourself, yeah, it just makes it a bit more cost effective. So no, it is not particularly sort of unusual. It's fairly common. When you get to some manufacturers like Atomic Aquatics, it's quite rare that you see Atomic Aquatic designs sort of anywhere else, or their designs borrowed from somewhere else. That's quite unusual. But yeah, when you do get to some manufacturers, some regulators, it's not usually their flagship stuff. That's usually quite unique, but the some of the range, yeah, it is not unusual to see fairly similar copies elsewhere. Alejandro Stahl Aguilar asks, let's talk about Boltsnaps. Do let's. How many is too many? I don't understand your question. So I have like one bolt snap for each piece of equipment, and then I add one double ender. So I'm typically diving with at least 2 on every single dive. That's probably the minimum. I think I did a video back during sort of lockdown on my old channel, and I think I had like 8 double enders in my thigh pockets when you break it down, and I had like my wet notes and my spool and my backup spool and like a torch and all the other like the like max capacity stuff. I think I ended up with like 8 plus that like spare one. So but for like minimum, if I have a double ender on my spool and my DSMB is attached onto the spool, then that's 1, and I always carry 1 extra, because people drop stuff. Even if it's not you, your buddy is like trying to do something, but they drop their double ender. It is always handy if someone has a spare, so you just get that out of your pocket. But as long as they're not dangling off you and you've got tons of them, then yeah, but 1 spare and everything else has its use. For most things on like tools, if it's on a torch or a dive knife, it's usually sewn onto it, or not sewn onto me, but tied on with like a cave line, and then that's clipped off onto a D-ring. So don't really count those, I guess. And then yeah, it's just double enders for stuff like wet notes and spools and reels and stuff. And that's it for this week. Good questions, everybody. Well done. Again, if you have any questions that you want me to sort of mention in next week's show, let me know down in the comments below. And if you use the hashtag AskMark in your comment, it just makes it a lot easier for me to find it. Don't worry if it doesn't pop straight up on the sort of comment section. YouTube likes to hide any comments with a hashtag or a pound sign in it. It's just one thing that YouTube does, but it does sort of flag it behind the scenes where I can actually see it in YouTube Studio, and then all I have to do is click a little tick. So don't worry if it doesn't pop up. I do see them, and then I'll pop them in next week's show. Yeah, thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.